So this thing about people who just look at this whole conflict from one perspective of, let's just save tigers. And they expect the people around the vicinity to move out and then not to indulge in the forest and stuff like that. I mean, that is not practically possible, right? Especially when we talk about people who are from these marginalized communities with very less income, whereby they have to physically go out there and get their livestock or the resources. I mean, it's easy for people to just comment on it, saying the people should rather move out of it, or we hear instances whereby we see leopards around the city, and they take away the pets or they attack people, and then people are like, it's because you raided into their homes, you captivated their homes years ago, but then not realizing that every part of the city was once a forest, right? And it goes round in circle, and there's no actual solution to the problem. What do you think is the solution? Is it just by putting in the money or starting a fund, which is not practical again?
It is in ways, because we're talking about how this outside perspective of people who don't live in and around tigers, how that impacts
who haven't had the first hand experience.
That can get very frustrating. I'll just speak for myself. It gets very frustrating because these are very real people that live alongside these animals. They are not pests, and community forestry in Nepal is a shining, bright example of community-led conservation. The reason that tigers have been so successful around Chitwan National Park is because of community forestry in these buffer zones. When communities started managing those buffer zone forests, those forests were in extremely degraded states. There were no tigers there because they couldn't be there. There was no prey. Then when community forestry started in this buffer zone, forests recovered, and tigers were able to move into those forests because of the community management. Because the community management worked so well and brought these forests back, it created tiger habitat. So communities and local people are the reason that we have wildlife in and around Chitwan National Park, around the buffer zone, along with obviously conservationists, law enforcement, and that great area of protected area. But it is also it coincides with the community-led conservation of community forestry. So this idea that people being in and around spaces that animals exist is bad for wildlife, it's too simple of a thought, and it's not true. And this idea that people haven't been living alongside these animals for thousands of years anyway, around Chitwan specifically, you have the biggest group, Taru indigenous people. They've been living alongside these animals for hundreds and thousands of years. So to say that they shouldn't and they should be removed from those spaces, I find problematic. And the people who are being most affected by issues of human-wildlife conflict, even climate change, are the most marginalized, the most poor in society. So if you have a problem with people being around wildlife, put your money where your mouth is. And how that impacts conservation in other ways, I would say from a practitioner perspective, and what I see working with my partners and being in and around government officials, national park officials, is that outside pressure and politicization impacts what we can do to help in those situations. So people really care about tigers and they really care about elephants, but their sentiments don't always people outside of that context, their sentiments don't always extend to the local people. And I'm you can sit there and say you love elephants and you love tigers, but in reality, sometimes these animals are very, very dangerous, and local people deserve to be protected too.
wouldn't transporting the tigers to another country or another place be a viable option, or is that a game of numbers for a country whereby the individual nations can declare we have this much amount of tigers, and it's kind of like a symbol for pride, rather than like when the number of tigers are out of our capacity, transported to other country or places where they have adequate space and the tigers can roam around freely.
Also, super politicized question, but like, no, because again, when we're talking about behavior, if you're moving an animal to a new area, there is a dominant resident male or dominant resident females, and there's going to be conflicts amongst them. So if there was problems with this tiger to begin with because they were maybe getting pushed out of a territory by a more dominant male, that problem isn't going to change if you move it to another area.
No, what if we move it to another area with lesser density of tigers? Wouldn't that be a viable option?
I don't know. That's my like true answer to that. I don't know.